we're going to move on to a really interesting topic, which is augmented reality. We've moved from very technical subjects to more social ones. It's a really nice topic. I'd like to present our speakers today. Can you hear me? Hi, Hector. Hi, Jorge. Can you hear me? Welcome. Good afternoon. This is a great panel. Augmented reality. Hector Faja is a director for Latin America for policy programs and government outreach for Meta, which was formerly Facebook. He's going to be talking, presented by Jorge Vega Iracelay, who is Argentine, but he lives in Spain, and he's an expert in technology and society. I don't think you were with us at that point when I said that you were the first person to believe in our project many years ago. Many years ago, you said, I don't know how, but I'm going to help you. And that was a pivotal moment for us because you were working at Microsoft. I said this in the Microsoft talk with Robert. I always say this because we're so grateful to you. And anyway, we like you very much because you've been such a good friend to us. Hector's a newer friend. You were with us last year on a panel. So anyway, let's talk about this cutting-edge subject. We have students with us from all over Latin America. And we also have students joining us online from Italy and Africa. We also have translation as well, so you can all join us. Jorge, over to you. Hi to everybody. It's a great pleasure to be invited to take part in the South School of Governance. It's a real pleasure to be here today. Thank you, Olga, Adrian, for this invitation, and for offering me the opportunity to talk to you and share with you my thoughts on such an innovative subject as augmented reality and the metaverse. I should like to congratulate the school for all the work they've done with the information society this year. And also, I'd like to recognize 14 years that they've spent teaching people about internet governance. They've always been very much at the cutting edge, tackling difficult subjects. And more recently, we've been talking about the impact of emerging technologies, as is the case with augmented reality and the metaverse. Before all else, I'd like to say that I am not an avatar, okay? There is no virtual representation of my person. I'm merely remote. I'm really online. I just wanted to make that clear. Right. By way of introduction, I just want to say a few words to open the subject, and then I'll pass the mic over to Hector, who is the expert. The idea is to ask a few questions, have a dialogue, and then we'll open the floor to the public so that you guys can ask questions, whether remote or in the room. Just remember to send us your questions and send them please to Olga, who is an excellent questions moderator. And she's very good at ferreting out things that are going to really break the ice. The metaverse, for those of you who don't know, is a denomination taken from the title of a book by Neil Stephenson called Snow Crash in 1992, which means more or less going beyond the edges of the known universe. There's also, I think, being a film which was Ready Player One in 2011 by Ernest Cline. And there's another thing which is really important to refer to, because this has got to do with the social network Second Life, launched in 2003, which allowed for interaction between avatars in another world. Obviously, this was a long time ago, but the point is that there's still some background there which is relevant to this day. Olga, I think it's time to show a video. Give me a second. I'm just going to tell. Shall we show the video? Jolly good.
The basic story of technology in our life, a todas nuestras vidas, la tecnología nos ha dado el poder de expresarnos y experimentar el mundo que nos rodea, una riqueza cada vez mayor. La próxima plataforma será aún más inmersiva, una internet encarnada en la que uno puede estar dentro de la experiencia en lugar de solo mirando. Llamamos a esto el metaverso. Todo lo que hacemos en línea hoy en día, ya sea conectarnos socialmente, entretenimiento, jugar o trabajar, será más natural y lineal. No se trata de estar más tiempo frente a las pantallas, se trata de hacer que ese tiempo que ya usamos sea menos. Creemos que el metaverso será el sucesor del Internet móvil. Podremos sentirnos presentes como si estuviéramos ahí mismo con otras personas, sin importar dónde nos estemos en realidad. Podremos expresarnos de formas nuevas, alegres y completamente inmersivas, y eso dará paso a nuevas e increíbles experiencias.
Ahora que mejor imagínate si pudieras aprender sobre cualquier cosa en el mundo, tan solo acercándote.
Creators, artists, creadores y artistas podrán conectarse con sus audiencias de nuevas formas y realmente incluirlas en estas experiencias compartidas.
Si we're connected, para estar más conectados y al mismo tiempo más presentes con el mundo que nos rodea.
It's a future. Es un futuro que va más allá de una sola compañía y del cual todos podemos formar parte. Si este es el futuro que deseas ver, espero que te unas a nosotros, porque el futuro estará más allá de cualquier cosa que podamos ver.
Well, as we just saw in this video produced by the Meta, we got a glimpse of the possibilities of interaction offered by this virtual forum. We've left behind science fiction so many years back, as described in the novel that we mentioned. We've gone beyond the universe. One day it's one kind of reality and the next it's another. But the media impact, the legal aspect, governance, all of these things are coming into play because of this technological revolution, which is so disruptive, presenting us with new paradigms. It's disruptive because of its size, its scope, its speed, as has happened with other technologies like AI or blockchain, which, not surprisingly, underlie or underpin this new phenomenon that we're calling the metaverse. A phenomenon that we could initially call something virtual or immersive or interactive, and it's also interoperable. This is an unusual, unexpected phenomenon because it blurs the natural frontiers between the physical and virtual worlds. And these come together in a new experience that, as we said, is immersive, where we interact through some smart glasses or other devices or a visor. We interact with virtual objects, but we do this in a real way, using real information. Even though this reality is augmented, it looks like a play on words, doesn't it? But we're going to see how this works through the dialogue that we're going to be having on the subject. There's a confluence of technologies such as blockchain and AI, where there's still lots of questions in terms of governance. And then we have this additional complexity of the metaverse, when there is a multi-platform interaction, which also presents its own challenges in terms of regulation and governance. Another fact is that Gen Z and millennials are hyper-connected on these multiple screens. The new alpha generations, which are under 11, socialize their interactions through Minecraft or Roblox or similar platform games, with all the challenges that that presents to society today. 25% of people spend at least 1 hour in the metaverse. That's what we're imagining for 2026. By then, 30% of the organizations selling things in the world will be marketing products ready for use in the metaverse. These aren't just abstract figures, but a reality. And this talks about what the metaverse can bring us as an ecosystem or as a business. Although there are some organizations that are a little bit more skeptical about this confluence of emerging technologies, there is a singularity. It's not just about games. There are lots of industries that are involved in the metaverse. Another key industry is the entertainment industry. But some artists have decided to use the metaverse platforms exclusively for their concerts, like Ariana Grande, who was represented by an avatar, and she interacted in a virtual space exclusively for over 1 million people. This is totally disruptive and revolutionary. You're choosing a new channel for an entertainment medium. And to wind up, this isn't just relevant for several economic sectors, but also in geopolitical terms. Today, there are governments such as South Korea, which have created the Metaverse Alliance in a public-private university, and they seek to work with key industries as well as with the public administration. In China, for example, in Seoul, and in China, they're not just investing in the sector through some of the major companies, but they're also developing apps and analysis which have an impact on the geopolitical future of the metaverse. And this is going to have major relevance for the future development of geopolitics, the internet geopolitics. Now, as this session is going to be a dialogue, I'd like to kick off by asking Hector a question. Thanks, Hector, for agreeing to tackle any question. Please take advantage of this fantastic opportunity to ask questions. We want this to be an open dialogue. We want it to be frank. And we're very grateful to Hector for sharing his knowledge. First question is, what do we understand the metaverse to mean? There was already a description that we saw in the video, but how would you define it? What is Meta's vision of this phenomenon? Let's call it a phenomenon, shall we? This augmented reality, which you guys are calling the metaverse. Jorge, Olga, thank you so much for the invitation. You are the founders of these dialogue spaces in Latin America, and I'm very grateful for the invitation. I want to give you a bit of background to frame this discussion, because the metaverse is something that fascinates me. It's not just about pieces of equipment and wires and cables and alternative worlds. It's more about the human being and his attempts to communicate. As Noah Harari said in Homo sapiens, it is man who is working on cooperating and thus develops communications, and that is innate to human beings. Professor Robert Artung says that the cognitive revolution, which starts with the alphabet over 5,000 years, followed by the book, which Eileen Bayer talks about, and then the advent of the printing press at the beginning of the 15th century, which created greater openness to ideas. And the fourth great stage in this cognitive revolution is internet, which, unlike the creation of the printing press, internet has truly democratized the way in which you communicate. The metaverse is part of all of this. In the evolution of internet, the metaverse is merely a new way of meeting each other, or finding a meeting ground where we feel that we are together. We're communicating right now. It's great, but I'm still looking at a screen, right? Flat screen. And I don't really know where you are, in fact. The metaverse will offer us technologies to enable us to have visual eye-to-eye contact, read people's body language, enjoy spatial sounds so that we can identify where sounds and conversations are coming from. These are all technologies which will create a far more human and natural connection between people than just through flat screens. So this is a new way of interacting. It's less flat, it's less dependent on screens, and we'll have these virtual environments where all sorts of different immersive technologies will coexist. Jorge was talking about virtual and augmented reality, but in fact, there are all kinds of technologies enabling the metaverse to exist. It's a blend of technologies: blockchain, AI, VR, AR, computing power, 3D graphics, and so many more. If we look at the evolution of internet, first we had computers, desktops, then we went to laptops, and now we're doing pretty much everything on our mobile phones. Content has also evolved. Before, we used to connect to internet to look something up or share texts. Then formats changed, so we started sharing photos, videos, short videos, and that's what Meta believes to be the next logical step, enabling us to interact in a far more immersive and in-person way. Thank you very much, Hector. That's really interesting, isn't it? We can almost imagine that we're moving towards a fourth dimension of existence. Through touch, as technology evolves, things like this will be part of that immersive experience. So to round off this question, this AR of metaverse, is this like the next step in mobile telephony? Yes, we do. We believe that metaverse is the next step in internet, mobile internet. It's not like just, the metaverse arrived one fine day and changed the way we communicate. It's actually an ongoing process, and it's progressive. One technology follows another. In Latin America, we've already been working with augmented reality in ecosystems which are only going to grow. It's a technological phenomenon that we can call metaverse if we want, but it's really happening. Actually, I think that metaverse is an interesting way of encapsulating this set of technologies, which we see as a next step in mobile internet. Web version 1 moved on to version 2.0. I'm talking about, not just talking about formats and hardware, but rather about the role of the user. Basically, when internet started, it was a passive role. We would browse internet to look things up. And then with version 3, we would interact and start creating content. Now with the metaverse, we don't just create content and share it. Many of us can also create all kinds of experiences which can bring value to many industries working in the metaverse. Jorge, I don't know if you remember, but when I was a kid, a middle-class family always wanted to have an encyclopedia in their home, whatever brand it was. And then in the 90s, I found that through internet, you could access everything in Carta online. Still lots of text and lots of photos. Sorry? It was a Microsoft, wasn't it, in Carta? Do you remember? And then the Web 2.0, Wikipedia was born, created by the users themselves. And today, your encyclopedia means that you don't just write an article. In the metaverse, you can actually go to the article that you're interested. For instance, if you're interested in Tenochtitlan, you can actually go and visit it, not just read about it. That's fascinating. Tell us a little bit about Meta so we can understand the ecosystem and the role played by the company. What role do you see for Meta in this new experience, this multi-platform of the metaverse? Will it act in a decentralized way with other players, or will it be more centralized, like the Facebook or Google model? How does it work? What's the role of Meta? Meta is a phenomenon that works better when it's more decentralized. We're trying to create an open, free, and interoperable ecosystem that works for everybody. And we're not the only people playing a role here. There are all kinds of companies involved in creating the metaverse, small and large, from all kinds of industries and sectors, whether commercial or social. Even governments are involved. And it's very important that everybody be part of this discussion when it comes to setting the rules. That's very interesting. As with any industry, or with set of industries and sectors, this also has an economic value. So what do you imagine or project the economic value to be for Latin America and specifically for Argentina, given where you're just setting up new offices? We're looking at economic growth. An investigation carried out by Analysis Group revealed that if the metaverse is adopted for the next 10 years as fast as mobile internet was adopted, it would create extra GDP of Latin America to the tune of 5%, $320 trillion of investment being spent on the creation of an immersive reality ecosystem for Latin America. We believe that 1 billion people are going to be using the metaverse over the next decade. And Latin America has a distinctive feature, which is its geography. It's very rich, it's very diverse, but it's very badly connected. And the metaverse will help to break down these barriers. Then another advantage is greater employment. Experienced creators, those offering services, and artists. I'd like to think that creators aren't just influencers, everybody knows about influencers, but people who create all kinds of experience. Thanks to the no-code experiences and platforms, it's very easy to create experiences in the metaverse. Before, according to John Radoff, who is an expert in these kinds of technologies, you needed one artist per engineer. The engineer writes the code, the artist makes all the pretty stuff on it. But today you need 5 artists per engineer because the diversity, the flavors, and the different kinds of experiences consumed by users of all kinds are creating a new demand for creators in the metaverse. And the third great advantage is the driver for innovation in all kinds of sectors, from commercial to entertainment and games, but also social areas like health and education. We've launched a program which we already have in Argentina, which is called Mission and Peace at School. What it does is to foster social emotional skills in public school students to tackle bullying. We call it the empathy machine because it enables you to feel your reality as if you were in the shoes of the other. And the young people begin to understand what can occur with situations of social violence and learn on the go thanks to the feedback provided by the system. Governments can use this in tourism to promote touristic destinations and also for urban planning and all kinds of other uses. That's very interesting. You mentioned some of the challenges, such as geographical fragmentation. Would you like to talk about any other? And talk about anything that distinguishes Latin America so it can truly take advantage of the advantages offered by the metaverse? Absolutely. I think that Latin America is going to be a great power in terms of generating digital content for the metaverse. We have extraordinary sources of creative talent. We have the creators of magic realism, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, And it's a very creative, very fertile place, always seeking to use fantasy and creativity to build new experiences, to express its cultural diversity. I think Brazil and Mexico are probably the ones who are already working on the Smart Gear platform used by Meta to create new experiences in augmented reality. Over 100 million people are using augmented reality in Instagram and Facebook. And in Latin America, there is a market that can be as big as 600 million to a billion users, including Hispanic speakers in the United States, even though speaking more Spanish and Portuguese, because the idea is to express the diversity in Latin America at cultural and linguistic level. We're investing in research programs, thanks to the OAS, to train and certify 10,000 content creators in several different countries. And we already also working with various institutions in Argentina, Mexico, and Brazil, academic institutions, to train people to make the most of the opportunities offered by the metaverse for Latin America. Magic realism indeed. Let's not forget Borges, also very important. How could we forget Borges? We are in Argentina. Let's talk a little bit about the impact, the social impact of these kinds of disruptive technologies. These kinds of technologies and the AI bring about change in society, in the way people play, in cognitive developments, and in people's social interaction. This is a very swift process. We're living in an analog world, and indeed there are countries which are finding the transition to a digital world very difficult. And we're going from a digital world to an immersive one, which is moving at a huge speed, whether it's augmented or virtual reality. And some studies are showing us that social networks, online gaming, is producing certain addictive behaviors, which can lead to the damage, harm for younger people, children, teenagers, provoking high anxiety levels, children even self-harming. There are different studies on all of this. And it's actually it's occupying a center stage on the public agenda, particularly when you look at some of the practices that have evolved from these tools. I'd really appreciate your frankness in talking about this, and if you have any learnings that you can share. People have also been talking about the impact this is having on the democracies, fake news, alternative events, which could be linked with this augmented reality, an extension of physical reality, but also in some sense a kind of utopia, or a world to which you can escape to from the boring routine of daily life. So how do you evaluate and mitigate the more negative social aspects of the use of social networks? And also there's a whole thing about gaming, this augmented or virtual reality, which is a key part of the metaverse. And we're looking at very vulnerable populations like children and teenagers. Gosh, I will try to organize my response. When social networks hit the scene, remember that people were terribly positive about this. We were talking about the Arab Spring, the empowerment of citizenry, the digital transformation of SMEs. And in some ways, social networks were originally seen as the panacea. And then things just seem to have got out of hand, and to the point where now it seems to be the mother of all problems. So I think that the debate needs to be a little bit better balanced so that we can understand how complex the phenomenon of social networks and communication patterns is. First, I'd like to look at this question. I want to be very humble about how I look at this. I prefer to talk about rights and the dilemmas that we have to solve, which may never be solved because the phenomenon of communication is constantly changing. Meta has a lot of work to do to build trust, particularly in its new innovation projects that it's presenting. Meta wants to build trust by being transparent and open about what it wants to do, but also about challenges. Technologies create benefits and risks. Let us not forget the wheel, okay? The wheel obviously brought many benefits, but I also have data that in Africa, the wheel creates 27 accidents per 100,000 inhabitants and 9 per 100,000 in Europe, which has more cars. The thing is that Europe has better infrastructure, regulations, and road safety education. So there are lots of phenomena involved when a technology ends up being harmful or beneficial. And these are the subjects that we want to talk about with civil society organizations and governments and in fora like this. We're not doing this by ourselves and we don't want to. Metaverse doesn't belong to Meta. Otherwise, it wouldn't be Meta. It's an interconnected universe of many different actors who come together to create and exchange experiences. Now, if people do not feel safe in the metaverse, it's not possible because people won't want to be in it. But we also know that social problems are reflected as much in the physical world as in the unreal one. These discussions are also about human rights when we're talking about freedom of expression. And the abuse of freedom of expression can also harm other people. So can freedom of expression limit other people's right to feel safe? Now, that is the art and science of content moderation, which is something that we do on our social networks with experts from all around the world. We've also created independent organisms such as the Oversight Board, where we have journalists and experts from all over the world advising us and issue binding decisions on content moderation. I think this is important, not merely to legislate or for legislative purposes, nor to think that content moderation exercises should be applied to the metaverse, because these are communication phenomena which are quite different between them. In the metaverse, you can go to a bar, and maybe in this bar, the rules of the discussion will be quite different from those in a school or in a university classroom or a masterclass given by a Harvard professor to which you can access. So currently, we are committed to a multi-sectoral dialogue in the Americas on freedom of expression being led by the Inter-American Human Rights Commission and the Special Rapporteur on freedom of expression. Because we do not want to take decisions that limit people's freedoms, but rather protect them. And that we are also able to achieve the correct balance between these different interactions. You mentioned an example just now. On the Horizons platform, where people can go in and create worlds, there are rules. People have tools to protect themselves, like personal space limits that you can establish, so that people cannot get any closer than a certain pre-established distance. You can abandon the place where you are if you don't feel safe. You can silence other people who are bothering you. Or you can even block other people if you feel that they are exhibiting abusive behavior, and you can also report them and get help. So what can I say? Growth on social networks was incredibly swift. There is a principle in law which says that law follows facts. The problem is that the fact of the evolution of social networks was so fast that it exceeded people's imagination. Now, in the metaverse, we know that the technologies will take some 10 years to mature, which makes it so important to start talking about this as early as possible. Thank you very much, Hector. Don't you think that this virtual immersive reality, the use of avatars and so forth, don't you think it encourages more permissive behaviors? This is a bit what happened in Second Life. People exhibited behaviors that they perhaps wouldn't have done as workers or parents or other kinds of figures in real life. So how do you solve that kind of thing? What is the vision that you have?
First, we have a code of conduct that is virtual, that is pretty clear for people. And there are also code of conduct at a school or at a home. There should be rules. And also we need digital education. Online use of digital platforms without education in the digital world is a problem, because digital platforms are not the single responsible for the environment within social media, but users are also responsible. So it's important to see the role of digital platforms to develop products that can be tested before those products are adopted. Also, lawmakers and social organizations should discuss all the things that they consider important, and the same applies to users. They should understand the importance of the risks involved and also the abuses that may occur when they are not aware of these things. Also, we are living in we learn to live in the 20th century, but not in the 21st, where we have to live mainly online. That's why I like to explain why we talk about the physical and the online worlds. Actually, the pandemic showed that the physical and the virtual worlds are the real world. Today, the real world takes place in both places, and we need to be ready to face it. Yes, it has to do with accountability, and we should demand that from adult users in the case of kids or teenagers. And I believe that the dynamics is kind of different. It's a very interesting topic, but I think that we need to continue with the rest of the topics that are also interesting for the audience. Metaverse is kind of a virtual thing that, or a virtual government, because it has cryptocurrencies. We have the NFTs, which are traded within Metaverse. So there are, it has its own rules. So this would mean that should it have its own regulations, its own courts? How do you consider this? Do you think is it kind of a legal loop there, or what do you think it should be done? This is not convenient for anybody. I remember the digital law courses and John Barrow's declaration in 1996, where he was talking about like a kind of a cyber anarchy with this liberal influence he had, where he said governments didn't have the legal tools to do it. And there were a lot of discussions about metaverse, but with the advent of internet, we learned a lot of lessons. Cyberspace and the physical space, which are not the same, and then the international instruments which are used in the cyberspace. So when we started using internet, it at the beginning it was like nobody's land, and now it's everybody's. So we need some rules in order to operate correctly. And we see it as an improved cyberspace with a lot of advantages, such as being universal, free, cooperative, and human. It's very interesting to give an example. The avatar should be maybe protected by intellectual property rights, maybe. What do you think? When we are talking about digital tools, it has to do with interoperability rules. And when there's an experience in the real world, there's a very interesting article that you wrote about the Argentinian law, and I think that you're right. There are several challenges as regards the legal issues, and it has to do with maybe adapting existing rights and acknowledging new digital rights, because we need to have a technology that is used by people, that serves people. There is a question that I should ask you that I think that you have already mentioned something about it. How to solve this tension with underlying rights? I would like to mention these neural rights, specifically in this kind of immersive space with some of the apps using AI. The interaction between the brain and technology, which poses some challenges. In the European Union, this is being analyzed, and there are some attempts at regulations, but how do we solve this? Can you share your vision on these rights, which include freedom of speech, privacy, personal data protection, human dignity? And in this interaction, which is this immersive experience, what do you think about this relationship between the brain and the interaction with technology, handling emotions? It's kind of a long question, but what do you think about it? I'm not an expert in neural rights, but I want to mention that there are 4 principles that are vital in this conversation. First of all, we need to ensure privacy of individuals. This means to minimize the amount of data that we use, to have a better control so that users can control their virtual person, and that the use of those data is more transparent. Also, to promote economic freedom and or economic competency and interoperability. There should be a most prosperous economic situation in that sense. Another one is integrity, and security, so that people feel safe. They need tools. And finally, equality and inclusion, that for Latin America is vital. Immersive technologies require better connectivity, more ambitious digital education efforts, the possibility of closing this digital gap, and metaverse and augmented reality is very inclusive, because you don't need huge hardware or expensive hardware for virtual reality. And augmented reality is a new step towards the evolution of the adoption of technology. Thank you, Hector. This is a training school that deals with internet governance. So talking about governance means that there's a problem that has to do with national rights or national law, and it's not going to be enough because we need to think about the international level. So do we need to regulate metaverse? Which would be your opinion about it? Here there are many members of the audience who have been working with policymakers. So which would be your opinion on that topic? The message for those making decisions and being trained on this meta environment is that Meta is one of the technology companies that has promoted a governance conversation dialogue. Governance means a system of decision making that allows participants to understand why decisions involving people are made. And Meta favors that and is trying to coordinate that dialogue by generating new positive legislation, and technology should be used to serve people. And we are under regulations that do not follow the governance models. Let me give you an example. There's a war between Ukraine and Russia. Russia invades Ukraine. And a couple of days later, President Putin decides that 80 million Instagram users in Russia and 20 million users of Facebook in Russia should not have social media. And they were sharing many of the messages with friends and family in the invaded country. So new nationalism and protectionism challenges in the globalization phenomena are making governments think about digital sovereignty or digital nationalism that makes them think that data is the same as oil. A while ago, it was said that data is as important as oil. Data is worthless if you keep it somewhere and you don't share it. Data is something valuable when you share it, when it's decentralized. Data wouldn't have helped people to get trustworthy sources of information during the pandemic, or helped millions of small companies to be able to withstand the pandemic. To give you an example, the number of hours that underage people can spend using internet in China, and inclusion rights, and also the technological surveillance that is being studied so much and is so criticized. I want to give some time for the audience to ask the questions. So thank you so much, Hector, for your presentation. And Olga, the floor is all yours. A big round of applause for Hector and Jorge. Questions. I can see a lot of questions here in the audience. My name is Lucia from Argentina. I wanted to ask you how interoperability between metaverses is going to be guaranteed. For example, if I am in Meta and I want to go to the digital city in South Korea. And the second question is if you are exploring different techniques to have access to metaverse beyond the goggles or glasses. We have a lot of questions, so let's ask a few and then you can answer. My name is Diego Caja from Uruguay, and I wanted to ask about the economic growth behind metaverse. Is it going to be thought through an economic redistribution model? Or is it going to be the same as in big companies, the same model that is being used in internet? And with a connection with the previous question, technological progress sometimes creates a digital gap in the citizens. So thinking about that, how do you plan to guarantee inclusion and the possibility of participating? Another question. My name is Florencia from Argentina, and I'm going to ask 3 questions. As regards what my colleague was saying in terms of capital concentration, I would like you to talk about the necessary hardware production and as regards the level of accountability for the crimes that may be committed within metaverse. And if you can mention the psychological consequences for individuals as well as in a collective way that these technologies may bring about. Can you answer those questions? And then we will see if we have time for some more questions. First, I would suggest this essay by Nicolette that was published in Medium, which is entitled Making the Metaverse, and it explains in terms of interoperability the levels that we need to develop to make metaverse interoperable. We need to work on hardware, protocols, standards, and this is something that we need to develop together with the industry through a governance model, together with international organizations, so that we can have interoperability, global interoperability principles, so that we don't have to follow the models such as Jorge was mentioned that are used in China and Russia. Platforms and networks are going to be decentralized, and when experiences are decentralized in metaverse, people have the power to create experiences and they are going to be able to develop and create these experiences. Metaverse is a more decentralized model in economic terms, and it's going to give more opportunities for content developers. And I believe it's important to mention, when I am asked how we're going to be able to make metaverse or to make people without infrastructure or education be able to have access to metaverse, my answer is that it's not the responsibility of a single company. We do want to be part of this effort, these initiatives, but the ones accountable are governments, you, non-government organizations. We need to sit down and to dialogue about what is missing and how we can take advantage of metaverse. As regards crimes and psychological consequences, there are some interesting research projects that we are carrying out with SaferNet in Brazil, with the Society and Technology Institute in Rio de Janeiro, and also with several other organizations and members of the academia at the international level that will allow us to answer those questions. Today, we have the possibility of promoting the dialogue and to start working on the regulations at the same time that technology is developing and not after it is developed, as it was the case with social media. So that's why when we are having the discussion, it's important to start working on the regulations. And finally, innovation and digital transformation need to have some guarantees that would help us maximize benefits and minimize risks. But there should not be some obstacles that would avoid innovation and avoid people having access to that. Raine from Venezuela is saying, as a migrant from Second Life, I could see how bad decisions and restrictive regulations made it a space that was practically not used. So how can metaverse develop a balanced relationship with new users, companies, and developers? And also, how do you analyze the tension between technology and human rights? That question is from Claudia from Argentina. How metaverse and legal problems such as thefts and robberies is handled? What is Meta doing for a poor population to have access to metaverse? Montserrat from Guatemala. Those are some of the online questions. I'll try to be brief because I know we don't have much time, but you can send me to hvaya@meta.com all the questions, and I'm going to answer them. Technology is an enabler of human rights. And precisely because of that, it's that tensions start being present, and that's why we need to work together. Thank you so much for the invitation to be part of this school, Olga, Jorge. A round of applause for Jorge and Hector once again. We need to allocate more time for these kind of topics and discussions because these topics are very interesting and there are always a lot of questions that we all want to ask. So, you can send an email to Hector and he is going to kindly answer them. Thanks, Hector. Jorge, it's such a pleasure to see you online. And greetings from Adrian Carballo, Oscar Mesano, and all the members of the audience here and online. And see you soon through Metaverse, online, or face-to-face. Thanks for being with us today. Thank you.